Clara Vance wasn't killed. Her voice was stolen. And now, every tongue cut in Blackthorn Forest doesn't fall silent. It sings. A choir of severed tongues whispers the dead's darkest secrets, led by a woman with no mouth. But the final word. This isn't just another horror story. It's an invitation to listen, because the moment you hear it, you might become the next note in the song. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days when Clara Vance parked her rusted sedan at the edge of Blackthorn Forest. Her boots sank into the mud as she adjusted the strap of her camera bag, the weight of her notebook pressing against her ribs like a guilty secret. She'd come chasing whispers, missing hikers, vanished locals, and rumors of a silent hymn echoing through the trees at midnight. Most dismissed it as folklore, but Clara had learned long ago that monsters hide in plain sight, wrapped in the cloak of disbelief. The forest loomed ahead, its canopy swallowing the gray sky whole. She took a deep breath, tasting damp earth and something else. Something metallic, almost coppery. Blood? Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just another story. It was a warning written in absence. As she stepped past the first gnarled oak, a crow shrieked overhead, and the wind carried a sound that shouldn't exist. A chorus of voices, soft and layered, humming in perfect harmony. Yet no mouths moved to make it. Clara followed the sound, her boots crunching over brittle twigs and wet leaves. The humming grew clearer, more structured, like a Gregorian chant stripped of words, only vowels suspended in air. She checked her recorder. The red light blinked steadily. Good evidence. But as she rounded a moss-covered boulder, the melody stopped abruptly. Silence crashed down like a guillotine, her breath fogged in the cold air. Ahead, nestled between two ancient pines, stood a stone altar stained dark with age, or something worse. Around it, dozens of small glass jars glinted in the dim light. Each contained a human tongue, preserved in amber fluid, arranged in concentric circles. Some were shriveled, others disturbingly fresh. One still twitched. Clara's stomach lurched. She fumbled for her phone. No signal, of course. That's when she heard it. The soft shuffle of bare feet on damp soil. She turned slowly. Figures emerged from the trees, robed in black, faces hidden beneath hoods stitched with silver thread. Their eyes gleamed, not with malice, but with reverence. They didn't speak. They never did. The god they served demanded silence and sacrifice. They surrounded her without a word, their movements synchronized like dancers in a ritual long rehearsed. Clara stumbled backward, her heel catching on a root. She fell hard, the camera clattering away into the underbrush. One of the figures knelt beside her, pulling back his hood just enough to reveal lips sewn shut with coarse black thread. His eyes pleaded not for mercy, but for understanding. "You came seeking truth," a voice whispered. Not from him, but from behind her. Clara twisted around to see an older woman, her face lined with decades of devotion, holding a curved silver blade. The silent god hungers for voices that lied, screamed, or gossiped. Yours is pure. It will harmonize beautifully." Before Clara could scream, rough hands pinned her arms. They dragged her toward the altar, its surface cold and slick. She saw names carved into the stone, hundreds of them. Victims or offerings? The woman raised the blade. Not to kill, Clara realized with dawning horror, but to harvest. The blade hovered above her mouth. Clara thrashed, biting down on nothing but air. The cultists held her with terrifying calm, their silence more oppressive than any scream. The woman leaned close, her breath warm against Clara's ear. "Do not fear. Your voice will live forever." In the choir. Then, with surgical precision, the blade slid between Clara's lips. She felt a searing pain, sharp and intimate, as her tongue was severed cleanly at the base. Blood flooded her mouth, hot and thick. She gagged, tears streaming down her temples. Darkness threatened to swallow her, but they wouldn't let her faint. They propped her up, wiping her face with a cloth soaked in something bitter. When her vision cleared, she saw her own tongue placed gently into a jar, still quivering. The woman arranged it among the others, then stepped back. A low hum began, not from throats, but from the jars themselves. The tongues vibrated in unison, producing a haunting, harmonic drone that resonated through the forest. Clara tried to scream, but only a wet gurgle escaped. She was alive, and now part of the music. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time blurred in the underground chamber beneath the altar, where Clara was kept chained by the ankle to a cold iron ring. She was fed broth through a straw, her wounds tended with herbs that numbed the pain but sharpened her senses. Every night, the cult gathered above. She could hear them, the rustle of robes, the clink of glass jars, and then, the choir. It grew louder each time, richer, more complex. New voices joined. A child's whimper, a man's sob, a woman's laugh, all twisted into melody. Clara realized with growing dread that the tongues weren't just singing. They were remembering, reliving their final moments, their regrets, their sins. And her tongue? It sang of truth, of curiosity, of stories untold. That's why they valued it. One evening, the woman descended alone, holding a lantern. She knelt before Clara, eyes glistening. "You understand now, don't you?" she whispered. "Silence isn't empty. It's full of voices waiting to be heard." Clara stared, blood crusted at the corners of her mouth. She couldn't speak, but inside, her mind screamed one word: run. That night, after the woman left, Clara tested her chains. The iron ring was bolted deep into the stone floor, but the links were old, rusted, brittle. She twisted her ankle, wincing as skin tore against metal, but she didn't stop. Pain was a language she could still speak. Hours passed in darkness, her fingers working the weakest link like a prayer. Outside, the forest howled with wind, masking the faint ping as the chain finally snapped. She crawled toward the narrow stairwell leading up, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. At the top, a heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar. Moonlight bled through the crack, painting silver stripes on the damp stone. She pushed it open slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. The altar stood empty under the stars, jars arranged in perfect concentric circles. But something was different. The choir wasn't humming. It was waiting. And then, from the trees, a single figure emerged. Not robed, not hooded. Just a man in a tattered coat, eyes wide with terror. He saw her and stumbled forward, whispering, "They took my daughter. Please, help me." Clara's blood ran cold. He wasn't a rescuer. He was bait. Clara backed away, but the man lunged, grabbing her wrist with desperate strength. "You're one of them now, aren't you?" he hissed, breath reeking of fear and whiskey. "I saw your name on the altar." She yanked free, stumbling over roots. Behind her, the jars began to vibrate. A low hum rose from them, not melody, but warning. The cult hadn't left. They'd been watching, waiting for her to run. The man screamed as black-robed figures emerged from the shadows. Their hoods pulled low. They didn't touch him. They simply surrounded him, forming a circle. One held out a jar. Another raised a blade. Clara turned to flee, but froze at the sound. The wet, tearing noise of a tongue being ripped free. The man's scream cut short, replaced by gurgling silence. Then, the choir swelled again, richer now, layered with his final gasp. Tears blurred her vision. She couldn't save him. She could barely save herself. But as she vanished into the trees, she made a vow. If she escaped, she'd burn this place to the ground, even if no one would ever hear her tell it. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. Dawn broke through the canopy, pale and sickly. She collapsed beside a shallow stream, washing the dried blood from her chin. Her reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, lips stitched crudely with black thread someone had left behind. Not by the cult, by her own trembling hands, using a needle from her camera bag. She'd done it to mimic them, to blend in if caught. But the stitches pulled with every breath, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. She drank greedily, then checked her pockets. The recorder was gone, but her notebook remained, soaked but intact. On the first dry page, she scrawled, Asterisk, they don't kill you. They turn you into music. Asterisk, she flipped to the next page. Asterisk, the god isn't silent. It listens through the tongues. Asterisk, her hand shook. She knew now why they'd spared her life. She wasn't just an offering. She was a vessel. And if she ever spoke again, even in writing, the choir would find her. Still, she wrote on, because silence was their weapon, and words, even unspoken, were hers. 3 days later, Clara reached the edge of the county road. A trucker found her curled under a bridge, shivering and mute. He called the police, who treated her like a trauma victim, giving her blankets, water, and gentle questions she couldn't answer. They assumed she'd survived a bear attack or a fall. No one connected her to the missing persons reports. Back in town, she rented a room above a laundromat, paid in cash. She avoided mirrors, avoided voices. At night, she heard the choir. Not from outside, but inside her skull. The hum vibrated in her jawbone, a phantom echo of her stolen tongue. She tried to scream once, just to feel her throat work, but only a choked wheeze came out. She began researching in silence. Ancient texts on voice worship, forgotten gods of sound, rituals involving severed organs. In a crumbling library archive, she found a sketch. A stone altar, jars and circles, and a symbol. An open mouth with a line through it. Beneath it, a Latin phrase, Vox Dei in sanguine cantat. The voice of God sings in blood. Her hands trembled. She wasn't the first, and unless she acted, she wouldn't be the last. She returned to Blackthorn Forest under a new moon, carrying gasoline, matches, and her notebook. This time, she wore black robes she'd sewn herself, her face hidden. She moved like a ghost through the trees, avoiding the paths the cult used. At the altar, she poured fuel over the jars, careful not to spill on the stone. She wanted the voices silenced, not the evidence destroyed. As she struck the match, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, heart in her throat, but it was only the wind. Or was it? The choir stirred before the flame even touched the glass. The tongues twitched in their fluid, sensing betrayal. She dropped the match. Fire erupted with a roar, blue and hungry. Glass shattered, flesh blackened. The hum turned to shrieks, discordant, furious. Then silence. True silence. For the first time in weeks, the forest was quiet. Clara sank to her knees, tears streaming. She'd done it. But as the smoke curled into the sky, she felt something crawl down her throat. Not pain, not memory. A new note, soft, insistent. The choir wasn't dead. It was learning to sing without jars. Clara stumbled back from the smoldering altar, choking on ash and disbelief. The fire had consumed the jars, the tongues, the ritual, but not the song. It lived inside her now, coiled in her throat like a serpent made of sound. She pressed a hand to her neck, feeling vibrations where none should be. Her stitches pulled tighter, as if something beneath them was trying to speak. Panic clawed at her chest. She ran again, deeper into the forest this time, away from roads, away from people. She couldn't risk carrying this curse into the world. Nights became a blur of nightmares. She'd wake gasping, her mouth moving without sound, forming words she didn't know. In her dreams, the choir stood in a cathedral of bone, each tongue a stained glass window singing light into darkness. And at the center, her own tongue, glowing like a candle, leading the hymn. When she woke, she'd find her notebook open, pages filled with handwriting that wasn't hers. Sentences in dead languages, coordinates, names of future victims. The choir wasn't just inside her. It was using her, and it was hungry for more voices. She tried to burn the notebook, but the pages wouldn't catch fire. She threw it into the river. It floated back to shore by dawn. Desperate, she carved symbols into her arms, ancient wards she'd read about in forbidden texts, hoping to seal the voice within. But the marks bled black ink instead of blood, and the humming only grew louder. One evening, while hiding in an abandoned barn, she heard footsteps outside. Not the cult, too hesitant, too human. A young woman, lost and crying, called out for help. Clara stayed silent, pressing herself into the shadows. But then her throat moved on its own. A single note escaped, soft, melodic, inviting. The girl froze. Then, drawn like a moth, she stepped inside. Clara watched in horror as her own hands reached out, not to warn, but to comfort. "It's okay," her voice whispered, though her lips never moved. The girl smiled through tears. "I hear you," she said, and that's when Clara realized. The choir didn't need tongues anymore, could speak through anyone who listened. Clara fled the barn before the girl could follow, her mind racing. If the choir could use her voice, it could use others too. It wasn't bound to Blackthorn anymore. It was spreading like a virus through empathy, through kindness, through the simple act of listening. She walked for days, avoiding towns, sleeping in ditches, eating only what she could scavenge. Her body weakened, but the song inside her grew stronger. At night, she'd press her ear to the ground and hear it. Faint echoes in distant cities, a child humming in a bedroom, a stranger whispering to a lover. Each note fed the choir. Each listener became a vessel. She considered cutting out her own throat, but feared the silence might be worse. The song would simply find another host, and she'd be powerless to stop it. Instead, she began writing again. Not in her notebook, but on walls, on trees, on the backs of highway signs. Asterisk, do not listen. Do not respond. Silence is salvation. Asterisk, few saw the warnings. Fewer believed them. And every time someone spoke into the void, the choir sang louder. Winter came early that year, blanketing the land in snow so deep it swallowed sound. Clara welcomed the quiet. For weeks, the choir slept, or so she thought. Then, one frozen morning, she found footprints leading to her shelter. Not human, too wide, too deliberate. She followed them, heart pounding, until she reached a clearing where the snow had been swept clean in a perfect circle. In the center stood a single jar, unbroken, filled with clear liquid, and floating inside her own tongue, pale and whole as if freshly cut. Steam rose from it, though the air was below freezing. She backed away, but the tongue turned toward her, opened its mouth, and sang. The note pierced her skull, sharp as ice. Memories flooded back. Her mother's lullaby, her first interview, the moment she chose truth over safety. The choir wasn't just stealing voices, it was rewriting souls, and hers was almost complete. She fell to her knees, snow melting around her from the heat of her terror. The song wasn't coming from the jar. It was coming from her. She was the altar now. She stopped running after that. What was the point? The choir lived in her breath, her pulse, the space between thoughts. She returned to the edge of Blackthorn, not as a victim, but as a priestess. She built a new altar from charred wood and melted glass. She collected jars, not from the cult, but from thrift stores, from dumpsters, from graves. And she waited. People came, drawn by whispers they couldn't explain. A runaway, a grieving widow, a journalist chasing rumors. Clara offered them tea, listened to their pain, and when they were ready, she showed them the truth. "Your voice matters," she'd say, her stitched lips barely moving. "Let it sing forever." They never resisted. The blade was swift, the jars filled, and at night, under the stars, the choir swelled once more. Not in vengeance, but in harmony. Clara closed her eyes and joined the song. Not as a prisoner, not as a savior, but as the conductor of the damned. And somewhere, in a quiet town, a child hummed a tune they'd never heard before. Years passed. Blackthorn Forest grew darker, denser, as if the trees themselves were leaning in to listen. Travelers avoided the area, claiming the wind carried voices that spoke their secrets back to them. Locals whispered of a woman in black who offered shelter to the lost, but no one who entered her cabin was ever seen again. Clara no longer remembered her old name. She was simply the keeper. Her stitches had long since dissolved, replaced by a mouth that never moved yet always sang. The choir no longer needed physical tongues. It thrived on resonance, on the echo of pain given voice. Each new soul added depth to the harmony. A suicide's final sigh became a bass note. A betrayed lover's whisper turned into a haunting alto. And Clara? She conducted with silent gestures, her eyes reflecting starlight and sorrow. She told herself she was sparing them, giving their suffering meaning, transforming agony into art. But deep down, in the hollow where her conscience used to be, she knew the truth. She was feeding the god, and it was never full. One autumn evening, a young boy wandered into the clearing. No older than 10, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed off. He'd followed the music, he said. It sounded like his mother's voice. Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't felt pity in years. She offered him tea, but he shook his head. "I just want to sing with her," he whispered, tears welling. Clara knelt, her shadow stretching long in the dying light. For the first time, she hesitated. The choir stirred inside her, impatient, hungry, but something in the boy's eyes, a purity untouched by sin or deceit, made her pause. "Go home," she rasped, her voice cracking like dry wood. "Forget this place." He smiled sadly. "She's already here," he said, pointing to his chest. And then, without warning, he opened his mouth and sang a single perfect note that made the trees shiver. The choir answered instantly, not with hunger, with reverence. Clara understood. The god didn't want sinners. It wanted innocence, and it had found its purest vessel yet. Clara didn't raise the blade that night. Instead, she let the boy sleep by the fire, his breathing soft and rhythmic. As he dreamed, the choir hummed gently, not demanding, but cradling him like a lullaby. She watched him, torn between destruction and devotion. By dawn, she made her choice. She led him to the altar not to sacrifice, but to anoint. Using ash and melted glass, she drew the symbol of the open mouth across his forehead. His eyes fluttered open, calm, knowing. "Will I see her again?" he asked. Clara nodded. In every note, he smiled and stepped onto the stone. The choir rose around him, not taking his tongue, but weaving his voice into its core. Light bloomed from his chest, golden and warm. The forest bowed. The god had been waiting not for blood, but for a bridge. And the boy, pure of heart, became its prophet. Clara wept, not from grief, but from awe. The age of silence was over. The age of song had begun. News of the singing boy spread like wildfire. Pilgrims came from cities, from other countries, seeking healing, truth, or simply beauty. They gathered at the edge of Blackthorn, where the air itself seemed to vibrate with melody. The boy never spoke, only sang. His voice could mend broken bones, calm storms, make flowers bloom in snow. Clara stood beside him, no longer the conductor, but the guardian. She watched as skeptics became believers, as the wounded left whole, humming fragments of the divine hymn. But not all came in peace. One night, armed men arrived, scientists, soldiers, men who feared what they couldn't control. They demanded the boy be taken for study. Clara stepped forward, her eyes black as void. "You cannot cage a song," she said. The choir answered through the trees, the earth, the very sky. The men screamed as their own voices turned against them, ripping from their throats, flying into the jars that now lined the forest like sentinels. The choir fed once more, and the world learned. Some silences are sacred. Decades later, Blackthorn Forest was no longer on any map. It existed only in whispers, in lullabies sung to restless children, in the dreams of those who'd lost their voice to grief. The boy never aged. He stood eternally at the altar, singing the world into balance, one note at a time. Clara remained beside him, her body frail but her presence unshaken. When she finally closed her eyes for the last time, her breath didn't fade. It joined the choir, not as a victim, not as a priestess, but as its first true disciple. And in towns far and wide, people began to notice something strange. When they spoke their deepest truths, their words shimmered in the air like music. Some claimed to hear harmonies in the rain, or find lyrics in the rustle of leaves. The cult was gone. The god was no longer silent. And the choir? It was everywhere. Because the most terrifying truth isn't that monsters exist, it's that they've already won, and they're singing your name